Welcome to the Sage Family Podcast,
where we explore natural, homeschooling, gentle parenting,
simple living, and family adventure.
I'm Rachel Rainbolt, the Sage Parenting Coach, coming to you from the Pacific Northwest, where I live wild and free in connection with my 3 wildlings and the Papa Bear in our fixer-upper on the beach. This is episode 15, and today I'm here with my friend Leah McDermott talking about screens and how they are not the boogeyman you fear. Leah is a former Master Educator and now unschooling mama of 2 who has made it her mission to help bring more natural elements to children's everyday learning experiences through her business, Your Natural Learner. So join us around the campfire and let's get living the family life of our dreams. The most downloaded episode has been episode 7, when Tamara Souls joined me to talk all about discipline. So I've invited her to come on back and do a special discipline Q&A, where we'll answer questions from all the Sage Family Podcast patrons. I'm so excited about this. If you support the show with even as little as $1 a month, you can post any discipline questions over on the Sage Family Patreon page, and Tamara and I will answer them right here. So head on over to Patreon and join in the show. This adventure of the week is Orcas Island. This was actually one of the places that I wanted to visit before we even thought about moving up to the Pacific Northwest from Southern California. So I have been so looking forward to this adventure. We went on a very special time of the year for our family, as Bay was actually born on Joshua's birthday and Father's Day. So my dad joined us too, and we took an unbelievably beautiful ferry ride up and stayed on the sweetest family farm on the water called Pebble Cove Farm. It's a vegan farm with an organic garden, free-range animals, kayaks, and a little pirate island. Not to mention, one of my favorite things, a jacuzzi. It's big enough for the kids to have hours-long free-range fun of their own, and small enough to feel safe and cozy. One of the best things to do from Orcas Island is to go whale watching to see the wild pods of orcas who call these waters home during the warmer months. But the birthday boys said no thanks to that plan, and instead we went skateboarding and explored the gorgeous Moran State Park, including climbing to the top of Mount Constitution, which is the second highest mountain on an ocean island in the U.S. and boasts the most breathtaking views. I posted a great many photos from this adventure on Instagram, including my winning pig selfie from the contest my husband and I had for the best animal selfie on the farm. Today, my friend Leah is joining me to talk about screens for us natural learning and parenting families. Leah is going to sound familiar to you all Sage families out there because she joined me in episode 8 to talk about reading. Turns out you all loved her, and she and I find ourselves being tagged and commenting on the same things all over the interwebs on questions about screens. So it only felt right to have her back on to have this conversation. So remind us who you are, Leah. What's your story?
Yeah, so good to be back again. I've loved hearing all of the wonderful feedback from my last episode. So many people have messaged me saying that they have found me through your podcast, and I've sent people back that way. So it's so great to have that overlap, and I love seeing that we both get tagged in things so we can share ideas again. For anybody new to me, my name's Leah McDermott. My business is Your Natural Learner, and I help families and educators provide as many natural learning experiences for their children as possible.
Okay, sorry, I was drinking my hot tea.
Now I'm jealous. I wish I had a cup.
Can I pour you a cup?
Yeah, it sounds so savory.
Okay, so let's start with misconceptions. Mm-hmm. It's always best to start by unpacking our baggage or deschooling our issues around technology. So let's start with these misconceptions. There's a whole lot of fear and shame around screens. What's up with that?
I think the biggest thing is that technology is still so new. And for all of us that are parenting now, the most exposure we had to technology when we were young was, maybe instant messenger. We still had dial-up and pagers. We weren't walking around with screens in our faces. So I think there's fear just because it's still so new. Our children are really the first ones to be, the quote unquote born with screens in their hands, and seeing social media from a young age and having that access to all of the information and gaming and everything. So I really feel that a lot of the fear comes generally from the unknown. Yeah. And even with all of the research studies that are out there, they're still new because we don't have an entire generation yet really that has been raised from the beginning with screens. So
and the way that we're using the technology and what the role of technology in our lives is advancing so rapidly that it's difficult for the research and for us grappling with these new waves, it's difficult for us to keep up.
Exactly. And, some of the biggest ones I think there's two that I've kind of narrowed it down to, I think, at least for this conversation. And the first one is that it's going to, quote unquote, rot their brains, right? Like if they're just sitting around staring at a screen all the time, they're not learning anything, they're not doing anything useful, they're not able to communicate with others anymore. And I mean, I know, at least with my children, that's completely not true. Mm-hmm. They are using that screen to learn new things. They are chatting with the friend sitting next to them and practicing communication through typing. They're practicing how to communicate through written language. They are certainly not rotting their brains by any means.
Yeah, completely agree. I think a big fear that I see a lot is around self-regulation. Mm-hmm. And it goes something like, I have to regulate for them because they wouldn't self-regulate. Well, they can't develop self-regulation if you regulate for them. It's just like with food, right? Like we might offer carrots and chicken and rice and peach cobbler. And that's like offering like a healthy variety of materials and experiences and connections. But all the research on food and eating disorders is consistent and clear that if you control your child's food intake, they will lose the brain-body connection that informs self-regulation. And moreover, eating choices will become about control and shame. So it's the same with screens. Like you don't want to get stuck in the forbidden fruit cycle of binging. And there's this economic principle called diminished marginal utility that says that basically the more of something you have, the less value those subsequent units hold for you. So if your child has 1 hour of screen time, they're going to devour it like one scoop of ice cream. But none of my kids have ever asked for a third scoop of ice cream, even though we've never told them they couldn't have one. And I suppose it all comes back to that trust piece, really. And I mean, for families that feel like they need more soft structure in the flow of their days with screens, I sometimes recommend my bucket system class as a helpful resource, but really it all comes down to that trust.
Absolutely. And, so often we try to think of, and I feel like we talked about this with reading too, and it's true with everything around our children with that trust piece, is that if we try to control it all, and we think about how you would feel, if your partner came to you and said, I'm cutting back your screen time, you're only allowed to have it from 12 to 1 now, what would you even do? I would panic. Like, how am I going to utilize that time in the best way? And what if I'm not finished yet at 1 o'clock and the timer clicks and that just means that I'm done no matter what? Then that builds anxiety, like what they're doing doesn't matter. And, you brought up a really good point. I love that food analogy because it's all about offering other options instead of forcing them to take the other option. And one of the most important things that I think is, valuable in my home is that our environment is engaging. My children love to play Minecraft and do things on their screens, but if something more appealing presents itself, they will drop the screens in a heartbeat. They would much rather go on a family hike or do an art project or build with some Legos. If it's about having the options for them to make those choices instead of trying to control everything that they're doing.
Yeah. I think when I work with a lot of parents, I think a question that I ask a lot is like, what is the underlying fear? Because I think if we're making parenting choices out of fear, we're going to be led astray down the wrong path. So what are your underlying fears? I think like you were talking about like that it will rot their brain, or a fear that I hear is that like that they'll never put it down, that they'll never do anything outside of the screen. But I think just like with food, if you say like my kid would never for the rest of their lives ever eat anything other than peanut butter.
Right.
They may eat a whole lot of peanut butter for 5 months and then they'll move on to something else. Or they'll eat a lot of peanut butter, but they will eat other things too, as long as they're being provided and offered with like connection and, of accessibility, all these other things, that it will naturally flesh out.
Absolutely. And I think the other big fear is, and this is what I have been doing a lot of research about lately with the misconceptions around that, is aggression or bad behavior. So all of those correlations that we think are true about like violent video games lead to violent behavior, and seeing something unsavory on a screen will cause my child to want to act those things out or have those feelings. So I think that that's a big fear. Children need to have that fantasy play, that power play, superheroes and make-believe violence, and how actually, just like you were saying with something else, so much of what we try to control, the opposite ends up being true. The more we control it, the more they want to do it. And so allowing them to have that exposure where they feel comfortable is a lot more important. And so much of what we know that we think to be true, even because the media has made it to be true, there aren't really any studies that actually do correlate like violent video games and violent behavior. So I think the research for parents is really important when they have that fear, that they seek out information to prove that it's true or not.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of people talk about baby proofing, and I'm really not a fan of that. I prefer like accessibility. And it's really, there's a big overlap with like technological accessibility, I find as well. So if your mindset is all about control and restriction and preventing them from accessing and being connected with, and then it really creates this fixation. Whereas like if you're in connection and you're collaborating and you have accessibility, everything really calms down, and your kids get to like naturally explore with technology as a tool and as a material, just like they would anything else.
Absolutely. And I always have found with the other families that I've worked with on this, that if they are feeling like there's an issue with connection because of technology, that's just something that they're choosing to blame. It's never because of the screen that you feel a lack of connection with your child, or that they're choosing the screen just so they don't have to spend time with you or the family. There's always something else going on. Oftentimes when families feel like there's a disconnection with the child because of the screen, that the screen is usually not the problem.
Yeah, and that we can connect even if screens are in the picture.
Exactly. That's such a big one too, is that I think there's so many people that might look at a family and see everyone kind of sitting around looking at a screen and assume that that means they can't have meaningful conversations, or that they're all disconnected from one another. But that's just how our future is changing, right? That's just how we are. It's not really any different than everyone sitting around with a book or a newspaper.
Exactly.
It's just the way you look at it. It's just different.
Yep. Exactly. And I know, like, I've seen like memes and things where people are getting all judgy, posting a picture of like a family sitting around a restaurant table all on their phones. And we don't typically have phones when we're gathered around the table or any screens or anything, but there are times where like maybe the restaurant's really noisy. Like my youngest, if he's in like a really echoey place, especially when he was younger, like the noise would really overwhelm him. Like everybody has like their own story and their own needs, and just for the record, like when I look around and I see people in different situations, or like a mom on her phone at the park, like I feel no judgment. Like perhaps that mom gets to spend all day long with her kid because she's working through the phone right then and there, and her kid is perfectly happy.
That's usually my story. I homeschool my kids, but I also work from home, and so when we're out somewhere and I know that they're in a trusted space where they can go play, I'll often use my phone to answer emails or catch up on something that I might have missed before, because I do spend 24 hours with my children. So they are not neglected in that moment because I'm using my phone. Or maybe I'm sharing photos of them with grandparents who don't live here. Like, it's just so important, that judgment piece, not just to not judge others in that situation, but also to not to take on someone else's judgment. You know, if you feel somebody looking at you at the park and you know that they're judging you, like, you don't have to take that on. You don't have to accept those feelings.
No, you don't. We talked about that in episode 2 with Joe Watt about that perceived judgment. Often there is no judgment. Like, people are really just worried about their own shit. Like,
yes, exactly.
B, like, that when you perceive judgment, like, that's something that's happening within you, and there's some sort of, it's calling attention to some sort of insecurity you have. So to speak to that and be confident in your choices is really important. Sometimes when you're feeling that, like I said, it is calling attention, so you may want to question something, but then after you question it, like, make your choice and have peace with it.
Exactly. So big.
Yeah. So screens can be, well, now that we know what screens are not, let's talk about what they are, what role they play in our learning and in our lives. For us, they are a material or tool that is planted in the environment alongside paper and sticks. But they are a powerful tool because they put humankind's entire repository of knowledge at our fingertips. One of my favorite shifts with the technological revolution is that schools, teachers, and textbooks are no longer the gatekeepers of information. Screens also connect my children with friends and mentors and offer another avenue for creation and contribution. You can learn calculus, interview a professional in a field of interest, look up details about a bird you just discovered, or play out engineering and programming through Minecraft while Skyping with your friends, which happens to be what Bae is doing upstairs right now.
Right. I mean, too, actually.
Yeah. All of my books have been written on my laptop, and my very meaningful coaching practice lives through technology. It's how I serve families all over the world. I read ebooks through my phone. Are those words somehow less impactful or valid than the paperback versions? I mean, this podcast is being created and shared through screens, and you're listening to it and learning through a screen right now. So how have you witnessed your children utilizing screens as a valuable tool?
You know, everything you already mentioned, and I often find myself thinking, I don't know how I would have been able to homeschool the children that I have 20 years ago without the information, because they are so curious and they have so many questions. And I don't know how I would have satiated their thirst for knowledge without instant access to all of the information that we have. You know, I mean, I'm sure I would have found a way, but it's just so amazing to have that information. And sometimes I just am in awe of how long I remember being 10 years old and having a question and having to go to the library and look up in the card catalog on pieces of paper and find the book and read the whole book to find, like, it would take so long to get an answer to a question that by the time you finally found it, you didn't care anymore, you know? So
it brings a whole new dimension to that too. I remember being in middle school and I was assigned this report on mollusks, and you talking about the library reminded me, and I had to, like, go to the library and look it up in the card catalog and then pull all these books on mollusks, and I just typed up this whole report on them. But at the end of it, I got an A on my report. I still had no clue what a mollusk was. Like, I didn't understand it. Whereas now, if my kid's like, what's a mollusk? We can watch YouTube videos of them, hear like an oceanographer talk about their role in the ecosystem and see the different creatures interacting. Like, it just brings this whole other dimension where the learning just really takes root.
Absolutely. And, you know, so for my children, and I think the way that I engage with technology is also so different from how my children use it. So that's just so wonderful that we can each have our own experiences as well. Like, I, you know, just like you, run my business completely from the computer. Yesterday and the morning before, I was leading virtual training sessions with teachers in Houston and in Ontario. So I was able to connect with so many people to talk about this type of stuff, to help them change the way they educate children. My children are, like you said, they use Minecraft. Just the other day, Charlie, he'll be 7 this month. He was scrolling through some of the settings. I guess he was just kind of getting bored with how he was playing it. And he found the educational tool setting, which flips it. It's supposed to be used only for teachers to use Minecraft in the classroom, I guess. But he toggled it on to figure it out. And it led him to this amazing like chemistry section hidden inside Minecraft. And he was like playing with the periodic table and combining elements to make new things. And that he was like, Mom, this periodic table is amazing. Look at all these things. So we got on Amazon and we ordered a periodic table book so that he could learn more. And we were watching YouTube videos, and it like you said, just turns into this amazing, deep and vast source of information and knowledge, so that when they have that instant curiosity, you can dive so much deeper than just answering a question really quickly.
Yes.
And also just even as simple as being able to be out on a hike, find a cool creature and snap a photo of it with the smartphone. Like, oh, you know what? That's really cool. Let's take a picture when we get home. We'll look up what it is. You know, it doesn't even have to, it doesn't have to interrupt everything else that you're doing. You know, you can be a tool for later too.
Absolutely. And I think this can be an important shift in your relationship with screens, because it can give you permission to set down that value judgment you've been carrying. You know, there's just that, because your kids feel that. You know, one of the first things I tell parents to do if they're struggling around the issue of screens is to take like 2 weeks and say absolutely nothing about it. Don't talk about the screens. Don't have discussions with your partner about the screens. Don't point at them. Don't make rules about them. Don't just get your finger. Just say nothing. And having that period of time, what that does is it disentangles all of the like shame and control issues that get mired up in kids and their use of technology. And I've talked about the same thing about meal times. Like if meal times are miserable, we know one of the first things I say is don't talk about food. Like when you're sitting at the table, you have my permission to talk about anything in the universe except eating. Same with potty learning. Like if you're feeling stuck with that, I want you to take a month or 3 weeks where you say not a single word about it. So, same thing with screens.
And I do that with families when they're setting up their learning environments. Just step back and just stop trying so hard, right? Just step back and watch, because what that does is forces you to see what your children are naturally choosing, and whether that be screens, food, going to the potty, going to bed at night, like sleep is a huge one too. Like just step back and bite your tongue and see what happens, because you learn so much when you take yourself out of the equation.
Yes, it's like deschooling, but with specific issues, like where you step back and just let all of those messages that are weighing you down, like shake loose and just observe and learn from your kid. And that is where a lot of the trust gets built.
Totally. And that message is so different from one that I see so often. I see so many other people recommending detoxes. Like if you feel like your kids are stressed out or you're stressed out about screens, lock them all away for a week. And I feel like that in most cases does the opposite. Like all it does is make them want them while they're gone. And then when they're reintroduced, it becomes it goes right back to that obsession that you were worried about in the beginning. So I have weird feelings about technology detoxes, because I don't usually think they're done for the right purposes. I think they're done out of a need to control the behavior.
Well, and it's more about a parent's need than a kid's need.
Exactly.
So is your kid struggling? Are
they do they want to lock it away for a week?
Are they having some sort of negative, like my kid, because we'll talk about this in a minute, but sometimes my kid will say, if they're very focused on working on this project that involves some sort of screen, they might work on it for like 2 weeks nonstop and then be like, oh, my eyes hurt. Like, let's go do something outside for the next week. Which is kind of the same thing I do, right? Like when I'm writing a book, I'm on my computer, like all day, every day for like a significant amount of time. And then I'm like, okay, I don't want to look at a computer for like 2 weeks. Like, I need to, give my eyes a break and get my body moving a different way.
That is such an important point, because what we don't often do, and this is true across the board, this isn't just technology, but what we often do is separate the feelings that we have as adults from the feelings that our children have. And it's kind of that blank slate mentality, like they're born without feelings or
Right.
emotions or all of the things that we have later. And I so often I tell parents, if you're how would you feel if someone treated you the way you treat your child? Like that changes your mind about everything. As soon as you start thinking about someone following you around saying no all day long, you would hate that.
And there's a
if
value judgment about the value of your work versus compared to the value of a children's work, because play is the work of childhood. This is how they learn. This is how they develop. And so if you think that, someone working in an office at a computer making a living to support their family isn't shameful, then a kid doing the work of Minecraft, exercising those parts of their brain and playing around with all of those things, there's nothing shameful about that either.
Not at all. And it's the same as if they were painting something on a canvas or if they were building something with blocks. It's something that matters very much to them. And, one of the things that I do a lot of teaching and learning around is the importance of valuing the work that children do.
Yes.
Because what happens is if we don't do that, then we cause a lot of psychological problems with our children. They have anxiety about finishing projects, about working around us. It shuts down their creativity. They don't want to talk about what they're creating. It really does affect how it's like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Valuing what they are doing and the work they're putting in is that middle part of their pyramid. So if we want our children to be creative and expressive and have ideas, we have to make sure that we value the ideas they already have. And a big part of that is letting them finish and respecting when they aren't finished. So, even if it's really late at night and I really know that my children are overtired and it's time to go to bed, because I know we'll talk about balance in a little bit, but even, I am still the parent and I do have good judgment about when my children have had enough. And so there are times when I'll say, okay, it's really time that we put the screen down and do something that's a little more calming for our eyes and our brain. But never do I just say, shut it off.
Doink.
Time to be done, right? Rip it out of their hands. How you have that communication. What are you working on right now? Can you get to a saving point? How can I help you? And it's just those simple extra minutes that validate that their work is important.
Yeah. Well, and it's process over product, right? I think that's one of the things that makes it difficult for parents to give it validity, is that there may not be a piece of paper with artwork on it that you can magnetize to the fridge. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't have value. My kids might spend 3 hours climbing around in this one tree, and I don't necessarily have a worksheet to look at, but I know all this amazing stuff has happened for them. And it's the same with a lot of the things they do through a screen.
Absolutely. There's so much problem solving, and often my son will be working on a Minecraft project. We've used that so many times as an example. They do other things. Lately, since he discovered that periodic table, it's all Minecraft. But he might be working something and he gets to a point where he can't figure it out. So he has to ask for help. Mom, can you look up on Google how I finish this or what this thing means? And there's so much happening that is valuable to them and to their learning experience when they have. And it's just another Minecraft house, and that's the finished project. And that doesn't matter nearly as much as all of the thought and creativity and problem solving and effort that went into getting to that end point.
Yeah, and so often the screen is not the end point. Like we said, it's like a tool. It's like a means.
Exactly.
So, for example, Sky might be looking up on YouTube different ukulele versions of songs, as she's creating her own version of a song that she's working on. She might record it and she might post it somewhere or send it to a friend. Maybe she wrote a song for a friend. So a screen is a part of all of this, but it's not even usually necessarily just like a pencil and a piece of paper isn't the thing itself. It's a means to something else. It's a tool.
And I think that providing quality resources in the technology is important too, because I know I've worked with a lot of families who are like, well, yeah, that's great that your kid is looking on Google and National Geographic and, YouTube, but mine just wants to play Angry Birds all day. So how are we helping them find those valuable resources that don't feel so much like a time waster versus something that they can actually learn from?
And so I will say that so each of my kids has an iPad. And I approach it with definitely a component of minimalism, but in viewing it as a tool or a material in the environment, I take the same approach that I do with all my other materials. So I really take the lead in being intentional with what materials I bring into our space. And in collaboration and in conversation with my kids about what their needs and interests are. And it's the same on the screens. So like what apps we choose, we keep it minimal. So just like with our materials, we rotate in different things, but there are never like 1,000 things on the shelf at once. So we never have like 1,000 apps on an iPad at once. Like we keep it minimal, and we choose with intention what things to invite in. So we look together if like a friend recommends an app, like we read reviews and we look at the in-app purchases and we figure out if we feel like that app would be a good fit, and it's a conversation that we have all together.
Exactly. And that it's interesting because so many parents don't believe that their children are capable of understanding those little pieces, because that's the same thing that we do. If there's something that they want because a friend recommended it, we look at it together. It's not, let me look at it and I'll decide for you. It's, let's have a conversation. Look at these reviews. Everybody said this doesn't work. Maybe this isn't a good thing that we, pay for or bring in. It's not very valuable, and they can understand that, and that helps them when the answer is a no. I've seen negative things about this. I don't like the content of this, or whatever your answer might be. Having the conversation makes it a lot easier to accept when it's just no, I've decided no. It's just so different.
And your criteria, your choices are based on your values. So for example, we and I think it's part of that minimalism piece too, that we really try and stay away from ads as much as possible. So like Sky has her own Pandora account. Like we upgraded it to the one with no ads because like that's important to us. I don't want my kids bombarded with ads all the time. And she wanted to download this Would You Rather app. Her and her friends like to play like the Would You Rather game, where they get questions and they ask each other, would you rather? And so there was this app that shows you like 2 pictures and you pick which would you rather. And so she and my husband like sort of investigated it and looked at it, and it did not seem appealing to my husband and I at all, but my kid had some compelling arguments, and we decided, okay, well, let's try it. Like, we'll download it. You can try it, play it for a few days, play it with us, play it with your friends, and then like we'll come back together and see what we think. And it turns out like that the would you rather options were just informing the equation for the ad generators that would come up every like 30 seconds,
Oh no.
Yeah, but that was like, I mean, even through that experience, that was a learning experience. Like, so she got to see like, oh my gosh, the ads on here are constant. And the whole point of it, like, they're just collecting the data to use to like fine tune the ads. Like, so that's a valuable experience because, now she knows about that, and that plays into our values. Like, so we know, okay, that app isn't a great fit for us.
And I'll even hear my children communicate that with their friends, which is so important too. Like, well, we looked at it together and we decided that we didn't want this app because XYZ. And they can communicate that. And that's so empowering because it becomes something that they have a responsibility for the choice as well. Yeah,
you're teaching your kids how to make good choices instead of just making them for them. Because then when you don't invite them to have a seat at the table, like the learning potential is just squished.
And then when they're adults, they don't have that power. They don't have that judgment. They have to figure it out. They lost how many years of opportunity to do that learning in a safe and controlled environment.
So let's talk about balance.
Great.
Like you mentioned, a lot of people know me, and I'm sure you experience this too as a nature-loving mama bear to wildlings. They're surprised to discover that we are good friends with technology. And so here's the misconception I want to speak to, that nature and technology are not mutually exclusive. I keep coming up against this false dichotomy, but we can worship nature and exist deeply in the natural world and value the gifts of technology. So we can use the GPS to find our way while listening to an audiobook or podcast and spend a whole wonderful day frolicking through the forest with friends, and I can take pictures with my camera, and we can use a phone to identify some scat, and we can come home and wash off the dirt and sweat and eat a nutritious meal together on the deck, and then spend a few hours playing out something meaningful to us right now on screens. So it's not either or, it's balance and opportunity and access. And the research shows that kids who have a menu of rich materials and experiences and connections do live in a healthy balance. So if you feel out of balance with screens, instead of like vilifying and taking away, connect and enhance your life together.
Yeah, absolutely. The balance is so important in everything, right? Like you wouldn't, just like you said with food, if your kid is wanting to eat only one type of thing, you would offer other things as well and try to help them find a balance.
Exactly.
And that's exactly, it's that environmental piece, right? And I see that as well, that I have so many families come to me and like apologize for their screen use to me. Like, I know that we should be outside, and I feel so bad that we spend time on screens. Like, you don't have to feel sorry that that's part of your balance.
Yeah.
You know, there is that like that just across the board judgment that if you want to spend more time outside, that means that you have to take time away from technology. And it's just not true, right?
Yeah.
The balance is everything. And I think it's different for every family. You know, the balance is going to be different for every family. It's going to be different for every child and every season in your life. You know, there may be times where, like, you know, we both live in the Pacific Northwest, so there's lots of rain in the winter. So it's just a little bit more natural that we spend a little bit more time hibernating and a little more time with technology in the winter than we do this time of year. You know, that's just part of that cyclical thing. But I really think with balance, the biggest thing is modeling. Like, if you tell your child that, or if you expect your child to put down their Kindle or their iPad and go do something, you have to do that too. You can't be walking around with the screen in your face all the time if you expect your child to do something different. So modeling is the biggest piece of balance for me.
Absolutely. And I think that it's important too that balance is so, like you said, it's different for each individual. So like you have your family values, but then each individual has different needs. Just like one of my kids they spent like 4 years playing with nothing but Legos. And I'm not a huge like engineering toy, like that's not necessarily my world, you know?
Right.
But that doesn't mean, just because it wasn't my right balance, doesn't mean I told him it's wrong for you to play Legos for 4 hours each day. Like,
exactly.
Because it's not wrong. Like that's where he is thriving right now. And that's where he is learning right now and playing right now and having fun right now. And so just because, you know, one person's balance might be one thing, everybody's needs are different. And so to sort of factor that in as well.
Yeah, needs and preferences too. So, I mean, right now, for example, my oldest wants to be outside all day, and my youngest really just doesn't. He doesn't want to spend as much time outside as the rest of us. And, you know, for the lifestyle that I live, being outside as much as possible, that is kind of hard sometimes to know that he just doesn't enjoy it as much. He'd rather be inside doing something else, but that is his personal need right now. And I have to respect that as part of our family balance with respecting everybody's individual needs.
Yeah, and the seasons will change and people will evolve, but like my husband, he has a master's degree in video game design, and he works for a major company in that field, and he financially supports our family. Like, what if that works?
Right,
so,
right.
I think to all of
Thank
those...
goodness for technology.
Exactly. Like, to all those people listening out there who have kids who play video games.
Right.
Like, it's working real well for my husband. And so he actually doesn't play video games on his own a ton, but sometimes he does play video games, and I've never had, like, a value judgment around that. And it's paid out for me.
Yeah. And I think that there's a fear about that. That's such an interesting thing to bring up, because what about the few people out there who can become obsessed with it? Like, can screens actually turn into something that is an obsession, right? I think that that's going back a little bit, I think that's one of those bigger fears is like, the 30-year-old in mom's basement who just plays video games all the time. And that's just so rare that is a problem. Like, so to make it a fear that I do see that so often is that they're going to be obsessed with it. And I really just think it's just so rare that that's actually a problem that we don't need to use that as a guide to how much time we're spending on the screen.
Yeah, it's definitely a fear that's blown out of proportion, and it's like a bad stereotype, like with stranger danger. Like so many parents have a fear of they can't give their kids any freedom because they're going to be abducted. But like the actual rate of that is like infinitesimal.
Exactly. And it's always a family member. So usually someone anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. It's not a stranger at all.
No.
It's typically a family member. Right. Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think it's like this definitely this negative stereotype. But yeah, people who play video games or other things like that can have really healthy, productive lives.
Sure. And it, for so often it's children or adults even who have social anxiety or who prefer to not engage in person with others. So they use technology to be able to do that, to have those meaningful social relationships. Yep.
Yeah, and just because your child or family member's way of being is different than your own doesn't mean one way is better or worse than another.
Yep. I think the biggest thing with balance is shifting your mindset. It's rarely in this case is it a problem with the child. It's usually a mindset issue that you have. So I love the idea that we already talked about of just stepping away from the conversation for a while, because I think you'll find the balance kind of work itself out.
Yeah. So step away for a while and disentangle all the negativity from it. And then the next step, if you still are feeling out of balance, is to look at when we're going to talk more about role modeling next, but look at yourself, because I know that when I feel that urge of like, too much screens, and I get the urge to like take the screens away from my kids, that's really because I am feeling out of balance with screens. And so I have to look back at myself. And then the third thing is, like I mentioned, fleshing out your life in other ways. So the research shows that, for example, for a kid who's like a latchkey kid whose single parent works 3 jobs, lives in a small apartment in the inner city, they will be more likely to spend a lot more time on screens because they don't have any other better options.
Sure.
And so putting that energy that you're feeling and you're wanting to exercise by taking away, put that into fleshing out in other ways. Maybe bring in some new materials into your home environment, or organize some new adventures to do as a family. Build in some new connection opportunities, like flesh out in all of the other areas. And that will naturally restore the balance.
Yep. Finding balance in your environment. And I think something really important to note there too is that still might not be an immediate shift. If the child is used to spending a lot of time on a screen, it's great if you go and change your environment to offer other engaging things, but it might be a slow shift, and that's okay too. It might not be, oh cool, mom set out new toys and throw the screen away and that's all they want to do. It's kind of the same as sleep or diet or anything else. It might still be gradual, but that doesn't mean that it's not working and that it's not meaningful.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about role modeling. You getting to a place of peace with your screen usage as a role model is a huge piece to the screen conversation, and I approach it with a whole lot of minimalism, which doesn't necessarily mean I am on a screen a minimal amount of time, but that I clear away all the attentional clutter, because we live in an attention economy. Like this is a legitimate thing. We live in an attention economy. Companies make their money by grabbing your attention. So I try and clear away all that attentional clutter so that I can be intentional with my use of screens. And however much time or whatever that means for me, I can have peace with as long as I'm intentional with it. So some of the specific things I do are turning off almost all notifications. That has been a really powerful one for me. So there's no red number or buzz pulling my attention away from the present moment. So if I'm on a screen, it's because I chose to go there. Organizing my cell phone home screen, I organize them into verb folders, like read or watch or chat or whatever. That's been helpful for me. And then removing all the apps that do not presently add value for me. Just like with physical objects, like clearing away all of the clutter of apps is important. And you can always download an app again. So you don't have to even worry
still
about
in the cloud.
it. Exactly. It's still in the cloud. Like remove all the crap.
Even if you paid for it, it's still there.
You can re-download it if you ever have a need of it again. And then I use, just like a random little tip, I use this program called Unroll Me. And it helps me.
That's a great one.
Do you have that one? I love it.
Yes, it's lovely.
It helps me unsubscribe from unwanted email lists, and it delivers one email with all the non-essentials rolled up in one. But also, I'm really proud of the work I do. So when we're all sitting around the dining table together and they're working on their screens and I'm on mine and we're showing and sharing and asking, that feels good. So through living a family integrated life, my kids are participating in things like online banking, which is important life learning. So what's been helpful for you in cultivating a healthy relationship with screens as a role model for your kids?
Yeah, so we have a couple things that we do. One of them is that I make sure that my children know what I'm doing when I'm on a screen, so that they don't see me as somebody that's just wasting time staring at a screen. Instead of them, they know they can come up behind me and go, oh, you're sending an email, or oh, you're working, or what are you working on? And so I make sure to take time, just like you said, when, I'll show them, look at what I'm doing right now. I'm writing a book, or I'm communicating with this other mom, or I'm sending photos to grandma and grandpa. So if they know what I'm doing, they see that as meaningful and valuable, and that helps them with the time they spend.
Yes.
On the opposite end of that, I make sure that I'm engaged with what they're doing. So I ask them, can you show me what you're doing right now? What are you watching? What are you building? What are you looking up? And that, even if it's something I don't understand or I'm not very interested in, I'm engaging with them. So it becomes part of that family conversation. Just like you said, it's the same as if they were reading a book and I asked them to tell me what they were reading, or if they were drawing and I asked them to show me what they were drawing. So I make sure that it's just a part of the everyday conversation.
That goes back to that connection piece we were talking about earlier, that screens don't mean disconnection. The whole time my kids are doing stuff, they're chatting with friends, they're chatting with me, they're chatting with my husband, they're chatting with each other. Like they love to do stuff where so the dining room table is really like where the Minecraft center is. That's just where they set up the laptop. And so there's just so much. I mean, it's really just like just one other avenue of connection for us. Even if I don't always understand it, if you're feeling disconnected because of the screens, then instead of pulling them out of their world, you need to join them in theirs.
Yes, absolutely. And I think it's funny, and this is part of that, the timeline of technology, because I think a lot of people don't equate a TV as part of screens. A lot of families will have TV on just kind of all the time as background noise, but that isn't really what we talk about. Usually we're talking about tablets or, video game systems or phones. So that's very interesting to me to see how, because TV has been around for so long, we've changed our mindset about it as a society. And yet now it's the handheld tablets that we have these judgments on, But the other thing that we do is we have a no tech time in our family. And that is just something that we decided together. That wasn't a control piece. It was, we do want a time during our day that is really just about communication. And for us, that's dinner time. So anytime we're having dinner, even if we're at a restaurant, that's a time when the tablets and the phones go away. Everything's, notifications are off. And that's just a time for us to connect in person. We talk about the day, we ask questions, we talk about, interests and what we're doing tomorrow. And that's just, the kids look forward to that. It's not like, oh, I'm not done yet. There's no arguing. It's, oh, dinner time. All the screens go away, and they'll remind us if we forget, like, hey, Dad, it's dinner, put the phone away.
Yeah.
And that's been something that's very valuable to us, to see that they still, it's not an obsession. They absolutely will find the time to put them down if it means connection with you.
Yeah, and again, that's not done.
That's connection.
And that's not done in a vein of control. Like you said, it's more about your family's culture. So when we are eating dinner and we're not on screens, we're talking, there's be like the rare exception, but that's really how it works for us. And we don't really say there are no screens at the table. It's just like at dinner, we're talking and engaging and we're eating. And so that's just not a part of it. Like when we drive, we listen to things, but we don't look at things. So we can still like we can be listening to music or a podcast or an audiobook and like talking to each other and pointing things out that we see. But if we're like looking down, then we're really missing the journey. But again, that's not something that it was like, we're not allowed to look at a screen. It just sort of evolved as part of our family culture.
And I think that is such an important part of it, because it doesn't, I don't want our conversation to feel like it means you can't set boundaries around technology, because that's not it at all. Both of our families have those boundaries, but the difference is that we didn't set them and adhere to them because we're controlling the environment.
Right.
We talked about them and have reasons for them, and the whole family understands. Like you mentioned looking down. One of our things that we talk about around here is that when you are walking with a device, you look up.
Yes.
Don't look down at your screen when you're walking, even if it's just from the living room to the kitchen. Set your device down or put it down at your side. Don't walk, because that's not, you're missing things looking around.
That's so funny. We have that boundary too. We have that boundary. I've never heard anyone else say that. I thought we were the only ones. Yeah, we have a no looking at a screen while you're walking boundary.
Yeah,
for sure.
Because it's just respectful of others. You might bump into someone, make them spill a drink, trip over the dog. Like, if you're walking, look up. You know?
So how I phrase that is to be present in what you're doing. So like we don't set up an iPad while we're cooking, like, because you need to be present in what you're doing. If you're cooking on the cooktop, you have to be focused on that. Like, your attention has to be on that. We talk about, like, you have to be present in what you're doing. And so you can't be looking at a screen while you're walking or while you're cooking or, I remember one time one of my kids went down to do their laundry and they were gone for like 50 minutes. And I went down there and they were just like standing there, like looking at the iPad and like
leaning over the washer.
Yeah. Well, we got to have a conversation about that. Like, you could have been done with your laundry in like 5 minutes and back upstairs and been like comfortable and like chatting with us about it.
Yeah, that's a big one for us. So that's how we, it's really about just the connection and the conversation. How are you letting technology just be part of your life instead of something that you feel is hindering connection or adventure or time or anything else? Like, you have to disassociate those fears and those feelings that you have about the tool. Just like you would anything else, right? We don't feel that way about a screwdriver. We don't feel that way about, crayons and colored pencils. So we really have to disassociate those fears.
Yeah, we tend not to say, like, God, my kid is reading way too much. Like, too much book time, too much paper time, too much rock time. Oh, West loves to, like, cultivate this, like, rock excavation everywhere we go. And I've never once felt compelled to be like, that's enough rocks. Like, you should be ashamed. That's a waste of your time and your attention.
Exactly. It's all adult mindset.
Yes.
It really is. It really is.
Okay, so let's move into our Q&A. So I posted in Message Parenting Tribe on Facebook that we were going to chat about screens today and asked if anyone had any questions about it. Megan wants to know how to address appropriateness and safety with our kids and technology. How to talk to your child about how not everything on the internet is safe for their viewing or participation. What does that look like without being scary or weird?
That's such a big one. And that's actually, I have a course on technology. And that's one of the days that we spend is talking about safety. So I think that, when they're much younger, so 3 and 4, it's a little hard to understand some of the dangers that might be happening. So parent filters, of course, are completely appropriate there. But I really think that around the age of like 5, 6, 7 and up, depending on the child, they absolutely can understand that there are things on the internet that isn't safe. And for me, it's just been having those conversations. And if you're already creating that culture where you can have those safe conversations about body parts, about being out in public around other people, it's the same kind of thing, right? It's you getting rid of that fear that you have about the conversation and just telling them the internet is a place where anybody can be there. And sometimes there are not good people there too, just like anything else. So and then you set the boundaries. So never, with us my children know we don't go into chat rooms or give out, you never tell anybody your name or where you live or how old you are, and really just setting those expectations. Even if there are filters in place, it's still good to have those conversations. Or and I think the other piece that we talk about a lot is feeling comfortable coming to you with something that they see. So if anybody ever talks to you online, or if you watch something or you see something that you feel is not good, come and show me, close it out and come and talk to me about it, instead of shaming them into maybe accidentally finding something on YouTube they shouldn't have found. Having those safe conversations. And so we've had one or two instances where there was a video that it wasn't actually anything inappropriate, but my son felt a little scared. I think it was something like a Minecraft horror video or something. And he brought that to me and he said, this made me feel a little scared. This made me feel uncomfortable. And so creating that conversation, that safe place to have those conversations when they're young, makes it a lot easier when they're older and have more access.
Right. Yeah, lots of open communication without shame is key. The without shame part.
Exactly.
If you haven't read the chapter "Your Vulva is Not Lord Voldemort" in the Sage Parenting book, I highly recommend it, and I'll link to it as a post in the show notes. My kids have a really good sense of what is okay for them and what is not, and why. And the why is so important. And it's going to be different for each individual and family. Some kids are very sensitive to violence. My kids are not. I definitely am. My aunt and uncle took me to see Jurassic Park at the drive-in theater as a kid, and I still have nightmares about it.
Life-size dinosaurs, jeez.
I still have nightmares about it. I cannot watch movies like that. Like, I still cannot watch a Jurassic Park movie, even though I love Chris Pratt, and I can't do it. I'm way too empathetic and have too big of a hero complex. Like, I want to save all the people, and I can't, and it just, I get, like, torn up, and I'm all in knots. Fantasy violence feels okay for our family, like laser blasting alien monsters in space as superheroes, whereas like a military game in which you're shooting other human beings in the face with a gun doesn't feel okay for us. But it's not black and white, and we're always open to discussion. The human body is not inherently sexual, so nudity isn't something that we necessarily have a problem with. Sex-positive representations of mild sexual situations don't trouble us, like a couple kissing under the covers as the scene ends. Like, that feels normal to our kids. Our kids know that we are concerned about the massive amount of disturbing sexual content on the internet or in the media, because it rewires the brain to no longer enjoy a respectful and pleasurable sexual experience when they are ready for one. That it can override that beautiful, natural sexual desires and relationships that they will enjoy one day. So they understand the why, and it makes sense to them. Cuss words, like, we give no fucks about that. I actually don't cuss very much at all. Like, I really don't cuss very much. But my kids know that you can use an innocuous word as a weapon or a cuss word appropriately.
Right.
My kids know important things like we do not communicate with people we do not know in real life. And all of these conversations have unfolded naturally over the years just through that open conversation. We do utilize the parent controls. On the iPad, under restrictions, you can set what ratings of content you want accessible. If they want to make an iPad purchase or download anything, I get asked to grant permission from my device, because we use family sharing, so all our devices are connected. We can locate each other, share apps, etc. My kids understand that the parent controls aren't being used to control them. And I've explained it as being on the internet is stepping into a crowded public space, like walking around downtown, with helpful things and lovely people and dangerous things and creepy people. So setting those ratings helps by holding back some of the stuff you don't want in your path. But my kids can always come and talk to me about something they want to download or see that falls outside of their settings. And they do. That's how they know it's not child-proofing. It's more like, oh, you want to see what's in that sketchy looking store window? Okay, take my hand and we'll go look inside together and we'll see what we think.
Yeah, and it's really not any different than the extension of all of the other conversations that you have in that safe and non-judgmental way, right?
Yep.
It's exactly the same as having a conversation. It's like using real names for body parts so that they don't have any shame about talking about it or asking questions about it. It's no different. And it isn't. I love the conversation that you said about having those natural conversations. It's not, okay, you're ready for your own device, so let's sit down and go over all the rules and I'll tell you everything right now. That's the wrong way to have the conversation, right?
Yes.
Like, I'm blocking you from this, and if you ever see this, you're in trouble. And, it's not that. It is put on the parent filters and talk about them, have the conversations. And if something pops up with a filter, come and show me and we'll talk about it. And having that open connection piece makes it very easy. It's just easy then. When you already have that culture in your home where you can have those conversations without anyone having fear or judgment, it's just another thing. It's just one more thing.
Yeah. Yeah, and it, like, exactly like you said, these conversations with no shame, like, and you're all connected, and it's collaboration, so they're not feeling controlled, and they're not trying to hide things from you. It just really unfolds naturally. Like, my kid they have these groups of friends that they Skype with, and they create these Minecraft realms with, and they all play together. And they know that they don't feel comfortable if they're strangers in their little worlds that they create or in their conversations on Skype. And so sometimes, like, a friend will ask to invite one of their friends into the group. And my kid will usually say, like, hey, Mom, what do you think about this kid who lives in this other country joining our group? My friend says her mom knows their family, but, what do you think? And we'll just, like, talk about it. Like, what do you think?
Exactly.
How long did they meet online, or are they friends in real life? Oh, they're friends in real life, and he just moved away. And, so we have these conversations in which we discuss, like, concerns what are your concerns about it? Like, and is there something that we could do that would help you to feel more comfortable with it? Or
Exactly.
and just engaging in those conversations is how they learn to make those decisions on their own. Because if you're the one who's always just saying no, 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 and locking everything away, and you don't have access to anything, then that just sets up this dynamic for lying and secrecy and forbidden fruits, and that's not really what you want.
Children have these needs to play these types of games and to, see these types of things. And when we take them away by control, all that does is make them want it more. Yeah. Right? Is, well, why are they taking it away from me? Especially without a reason. If there's not even a reason, just it's no because I said no, that, authoritarian style of parenting, it just perpetuates that desire to see it. And then they're going to do it in secret or in a friend's home or a place that's not, that you don't feel safe with them learning those things. And, the other part is that you're also setting them up for failure as adults because they won't have had you model those conversation skills of, do I feel safe about this? What are actually acknowledging their feelings? Well, maybe you said yes, but maybe they don't feel safe inviting that friend in. So just because you say yes off the bat, if you don't have that conversation with them first, they learn not to even trust their own instincts, only yours or someone else's. So that's just a really important thing to have those conversations together.
Yeah, absolutely. And they can learn being safe through technology just like they can learn being safe running around on the beach. If you're going to the beach for the first time, like, maybe your kid might run up to an animal and say, oh, what kind of animal is this? Can I touch it? And you say, like, I don't know, let's look it up. Is it safe to touch? And
right.
And then the more you go to the beach and the more you talk to each other about it and are aware of the dangers and the things that are safe and the things that maybe one of your kids feels comfortable swinging on this rope swing they hung from this branch and another doesn't, and and then they learn what the safe way to coexist with all of the other living creatures on a beach, and it's really the same thing with technology. As you exist in that space, especially with, like, shame-free connection, you get to learn all of those things and what feels safe and what feels good and what doesn't. It really,
go ahead.
It really is just like that childproofing issue. Like if you just
Sure.
lock every cupboard and gate every doorway, your kid never learns how to interact with any of those objects safely. They don't learn how to exist in that space safely. So if one day you leave a gate open, they're going to tumble down the stairs. Or if one day you leave a drawer unlocked, they're going to start throwing around knives because they don't know.
Sure.
They have no idea.
It's just like any other kind of play, right? It's just embracing that risky play. Just the other day I did a podcast interview about with a group of nannies about cooking with your children in the kitchen. And that was one of the biggest questions is how do I be safe with kids near a stove and knives? You teach them, you invite them in when they're young so that it's a part of something that is just a part of their lives and they assess those risks. My 6-year-old can cook anything you ask him to, but there are still days when he says, you know what, Mom, can you put the cookies in the oven for me? Because right now I'm afraid I'm going to get burned or I don't feel safe. And he still can, because he was trusted to self-regulate those feelings and those fears. He knows when something is safe and when it's not. And it's something that we have to start cultivating when they're young, just like everything else.
Yep. I love it. Okay, so let's talk about a day in the life. Describe for us your favorite day this week and share with us why you loved it.
Actually, I would have to say today is probably my favorite day this week. It's been I've had a lot of just work things and we've been kind of tagging back and forth with taking care of kids. So today, nobody had work other than this interview. And so we were able to wake up early, do some yard work in the garden, harvest a couple things together. And then we took a family bike ride down to the farmer's market and we got to walk around the market and pick out some mushrooms and plants and eat some fresh food and then ride back. And it's just been a nice, just relaxing time that we could connect in nature today.
Oh, that sounds so lovely.
It's my great, yeah.
But you're supposed to lie to me and say today was your favorite day because you get to talk to me.
And because we get to talk with you. Yes, of course. It's the icing on the beautiful cake.
Okay, I can be icing. I'll take that. So what are your favorite resources for people to dive deeper into the role of screens in a natural learning lifestyle?
I do have a small course on using technology in meaningful ways, and you can find that on my website. I can give you the link to that for the show notes, but that also talks about kind of all of these things in a very hands-on type of way. So how do you talk about balance with your kids? How do you talk about safety? And then some of my favorite resources for different, for math or for, geography, for nature and things like that.
And Free to Learn by Peter Gray cites a lot of great research supporting screen usage. One of the things that I think he talked about was how technology is really one of the most important tools of society today, just like a bow and arrow would have been like in a hunter-gatherer society. And so of course it's natural for that to be woven throughout your kids' lives. The Sage Homeschooling book has a whole section on screens, so I talk a lot about that. Because a lot of our learning happens through screens. So if you want the show notes sent right to your inbox, just subscribe over on sageparenting.com and you won't miss out on all the Sage family goodness. Thank you so much for coming to talk to me about screens today, Leah.
Happy to be back again.
Hope the rest of your day continues to be lovely, though I'm sure this conversation and getting to spend time with me is going to be the highlight. So
absolutely.
It has to go downhill from here, really.
I should just go to bed right now.
I'll tell my husband the rest of the day is a lost cause. My conversation with Leah is over. I'm sorry.
Sorry.